Hello and welcome to my EDN114 assignment using digital technology. The technology that I chose to use today is the Maths Learning Centre app, which is of a clock. So this clock will help my student or students learn how to tell analog time in a Year 2 classroom. So aspects of curriculum. In the Australian curriculum, a part of the Year 2 mathematics curriculum is the following substrands that fit and work really well with the digital technology that I've chosen, which is highlighted here, the Maths Learning Centre Maths Clock app. So the learning strands are under the measurement and geometry, and it is tell time to the quarter hour using the language of past and to. And it is highlighted here as well. Expanded, it is describing the characteristics of quarter past times on an analog clock and identifying that the small hand is pointing just past the number and the big hand is pointing to the 3. So I have decided to use this clock app because it works really well with the Australian curriculum for Year 2s in maths. In the digital technology area in the Australian curriculum, it can also be combined with the maths curriculum for Year 2s to create a greater learning opportunity for the Year 2s. So this area develops on concepts and abilities that they learnt in earlier years, such as Year 1 or in pre-primary, and it focuses on strengthening the foundational skills in computer thinking, such as using the clock on an app to help students tell analog time. So under the digital technologies, process and production skills is seen where this app can integrate into 2 different areas of learning. So this is explore how people safely use common information systems to meet information communication and recreational needs. I saw this as Year 2 students learning to read analog time so they can better, as they grow older, work time into their time management, and also being able to read the time. So parents could give them a time saying I'll be home by 10:30, and kids will be able to look at the clock and say, okay, my parents will be home at this time. This is expanded into sharing and describing ways that common information systems can be used to meet communication needs, such as I just said. So some examples of the learning opportunities. So one example is that all the students will be working together as a group in pairs to work out where the hands on the clock go on the analog clock to make a specific time. So these students collaborate together to share and exchange ideas, learn off each other, which allows for an active learning in the class. An example of this is where the app displays an analog time. So the big hand points to the 3 and the little hand points to the 12. The teacher sets out groups and they work together to figure out what the time is. At the end of the allotted time, students confirm that the big hand is pointing to the 3 and the little hand is pointing to the 12, so the time must be 12:15 or 12:15. This is really important that the students learn to work together, build social interactions, interpersonal skills, and also group work skills, so that not always one person is taking over, that they learn to share out what is happening, input from all different other people. So the digital technology app is really helpful as it gives an example for the students to see what it is, so it's a really great visual prompt as the students work together in groups. My second learning opportunity is that the digital technology with the teacher facilitate classroom discussions. The app and the teacher facilitate group discussions. As I said before, how the groups go and work together They're also working in discussions in pairs, which allows students to bounce ideas off each other, talk with each other, find the correct answer. So someone might have slightly wrong, someone might have it right, and then this way they can tell each other, work out how the one person that got it right, and the other persons can learn off each other. So an example of this is by having a blank clock from the app up on the screen and giving students a time. So as in saying 9:30, what is 9:30 on that clock? And allowing students to go away in their groups and start talking together, trying to figure out where does the big hand go, where does the little hand go. The teacher, through all this, facilitates learning as well by asking prompting questions. So a prompting question is just giving a student a chance to answer that might lead them in the right direction without giving them the entire answer. It's allowing them to come to their own conclusions and into their own learning. So an example of this is, so what does the 9:30 mean? Or if the little hand is pointing at the 9, where do you think the big hand would go? So the teacher can use the large clock on the board or the screen to help prompt students to visually work out the answer. Next one. So here's an example of one that I did. So here, on the screen, the students are given what is the time, and then they will just be given the clock. And then as they go through, the teacher gives little prompting questions. So what is the little hand pointing to? Okay, it's pointing to the 12. All right, can anybody tell me what the big hand is pointing to? Okay, it's pointing to the 3. So does anybody know what time this is? And then you get a range of answers, and as they working towards it, the teacher will guide them through to their learning so they understand and also know how to do it again. And the answer is 12:15 or 12:15. So in the Australian curriculums, it was really important that the students were using the language quarter past or quarter to or half past, whatever number. So this is really good to get the students thinking so they can see that all these quarters are what they're talking about. So here's another example. In this example, the clock up here has been divided into quarters, so which will also help, as I said before, in the quarter past, half past area in the curriculum. So this time the students have been given the question, what does 9:30 look like on the clock? So the clock is there up on the screen. The teacher will give prompting questions as the groups go and work together, trying to figure out what the actual time is. So such questions could be, where would the little hand be pointing at? And then they say, okay, it's pointing at 9. So then the teacher would go in and draw the 9. Where would the big hand be pointing at? They say the 6, because that's where half past is, halfway through the clock. So then you go through and you add this. So then now you have an analog clock with 9:30 on it. So now the kids have to come over here and tell the teacher where to move these clocks so it represents what's above them. So 9:30 looks like the bottom clock here. So my stance on the technology is that I really like using digital technologies, especially in classrooms. I believe that it really aids in the teaching and the communication of information from teachers to students. In this specific case, the Maths Learning Centre Maths Clock app, it gives a visual representation of what the teacher is trying to communicate to the students. The students can visually see the large analog clock on the board and associate it with a clock that's in a classroom or at home. By having such a large example that everybody in the class can see, really helps students to work through it. Everybody can see what's happening, and it's not on a little screen in front of them or on a piece of paper, so it works and it moves. I really believe that it makes a difference to the speed that the students pick up the content, as it allows them to work at their own paces, but also working with others and the teachers facilitated learning through the app help them pick it up. There are a couple disadvantages, such as limited creativity. So the app only works in certain ways, so you can only use it to the quarter past or moving the clock circles around in different ways. So it is very, very structured, which can be good in some cases, but it can also be a slight disadvantage. Another one is that some students might not have ever seen an analog clock, so they don't really know what it is. So having the clock up is an advantage, but it also is a slight disadvantage, so they don't go home and see it again. Another one is that students might not have had great experiences with technology or any experiences with technology compared to other students that grew up with it completely. So they've always had phones or iPads or some sort of technology at home that they can work with. So some students might be a bit slower to pick up the content because they're not sure how to work it. And that's the end. Thank you for listening.